Gaia again, part 2 of my program on all the brainwashed Americans and how special so many, if not most, Americans believe the United States of America is. And indeed it is quite exceptional. Exceptional in the sense that, in my opinion, the United States of America, from its beginning up until now, is the terrorist nation of all times, without exception. Starting at the very beginning with the Declaration of Independence, and even really before that, but let's just start there with what was supposedly said by Thomas Jefferson: all men are created equal. Equal. And have a right to freedom, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Now, of course, he was a slave owner, so what is the thing about all men are created equal? Well, I guess that doesn't really mean, depends on your definition of all men are created equal. It certainly didn't include women or slaves or actually just most people who didn't own any property. Really, according to his definition, it really meant white, upper-class, educated, non-Jewish, non-Islamic, non-brown, just nice white wasps, and perhaps you can throw in a few Catholics. And that's about it. And forget the women or the blacks, because they sure weren't equal. If they were equal, then what were they doing being slaves? I mean, just about all the signers of the Declaration of Independence were slave owners. Nice start. And wasn't this Declaration of Independence a colonist declaring war or independence on England? It had a lot to do with being taxed, and they didn't like being taxed. They wanted to run their own show, be free from the British Empire. Well, I just read recently that one of the original 13 colonies, that being Massachusetts, the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, were taxed at a higher rate after the separation between Britain and the newly founded United States of America. I find that very interesting. Let's just go a little bit further, the slavery issue. Yes, it's true. I mean, the blacks don't like to think about this or talk about this. But they came from Africa, and for the most part, they were sold by fellow Africans, fellow black people that were slave traders. Black slave traders selling other black people, African people. It's a continent. It isn't a country. It's a continent, not a country, Africa is. And blacks are not all the same. They're not all slaves. They're not any more all the same than whites or Asians or anybody else. Get this, Africa is not a country. Africa is a continent, a huge, huge continent. And they were rotten Africans who traded in other Africans from the continent of Africa and sold them as slaves to be sent to America and the Caribbean islands. But the fact is, the Americans, the colonies, and after the colonies, up until the Civil War, there were, I do not know the exact count of slaves, black people, African people, men and women, who were crammed into ships and treated in the most sadistic, cruel way and taken away from their homeland and became slaves, mostly in the South of the United States. The North, not so much. It was predominantly South for plantation owners. They weren't treated so nice. Not so nice at all. They weren't equal to anything. They were property. They could be killed. They were property. You could do anything you wanted with them. You could have them fight you to death. You could cut off their feet. You could hang them. You could set dogs to rip them apart. You could take their women away from them. You could fuck their women. You could do whatever you wanted with these Africans, who are now called African Americans in the United States. It's funny you don't hear people talking about Italian Americans or Irish Americans. I mean, maybe they might say my background is this, but politically correct to call them African Americans, which I find extremely insulting, you know. But they killed so many of them. And then, of course, the Civil War happened. And, of course, the big Washington government didn't want the South seceding from the Union. So the bloody, horrible, horrible, horrible war between the North and the South, the Civil War. And then it branched out. People wanted to go west. They wanted to go west. And then came the largest Holocaust of all time, much worse than the Jewish Holocaust, much worse than any Holocaust. The continent had native people who had been here for I don't know how long. They didn't originally come from the United States, but by God, they were here a lot longer than those white people who came over and decided they wanted this country. And according to most records, anywhere between 90 and 95% of the native population, the American Indians, the Indians we like to call them, Native Americans, all different tribes, not one group, were slaughtered, massacred, humiliated, lied to, deceived, destroyed, put in concentration camps. Does that sound familiar? Put on reservations. These lean, proud people were destroyed, humiliated. The life expectancy of a Native American today is the lowest around. They live in poverty. They're given food to eat by the U.S. government to keep them fat. They encourage their drinking. They can't handle alcohol. They happen to be of a genetic disposition not to be able to handle alcohol. And they can't eat certain foods. And they knew that naturally, not because they were scientists, but because they were people of the land, of nature, who didn't harm anyone. And if they had fights between themselves, fine. But it certainly wasn't over all these goddamn religious, political wars. They lived in harmony. This was a beautiful land. Beautiful land. And these people were not backward people whatsoever. And it's all a bunch of brainwashing, that they were some sort of savages who just went around scalping people. Well, hell, who started it? Who started it? Think about it. Think about it. It's disgusting. I don't know how many millions they killed, but they killed 95% of the population of the people that were here before they arrived. America, America. All equal. All deserve the right to the pursuit of happiness. Of course, that doesn't include the Indians, does it? Nor women. Women were property. If women in the 19th century and before wore pants, they could be fined or jailed, or they were outcasts. They were property too. They weren't allowed to vote. I mean, why would they be? Think about it. Why would half the population of the United States of America up until 1920 not be allowed to vote? I mean, why are people not allowed to vote? Why would some people not be allowed to vote? The blacks weren't allowed to vote? No, no, no. Because they were subhuman, you know. And women were property, as the slaves were too. So of course they're not allowed to vote. They don't have any brains. They don't have enough brains to vote. Men all have the brains. So even up to 1920, I wasn't alive in 1920, and none of you were either. Amazing, isn't it? Amazing. Prohibition. Stupidest law of all time. Killed more people than the booze ever did. Just a wonderful opportunity for criminals. Wonderful opportunity for criminals. Gangland, violence. Horrible things. Horrible things. Alcoholic beverages. What about cigarettes? Today, cigarettes. The cigarette CEOs and bigwigs say, oh, smoking doesn't kill anybody. That's never been proven. Come on. I bet 1,000% of you know damn well of someone who has lung cancer if you don't have it yourself, and you're coughing, and you're wheezing, and the emphysema. You think cigarettes are good for you? Only in a Woody Allen film I saw about 25 years ago, which was a hilarious comedy. It was set in the future. It was in some silly surgery operating theater, and all the doctors were operating on some patient, smoking away. This, of course, was absolutely totally black humor, saying, oh, in the past they thought cigarettes were bad for you, but now we know they're just great. And of course the cigarette companies, the tobacco industry would love us to believe that. Why don't they ban those things? They kill more people than anything. They kill more people than anything. And you know what they're doing? They're adding more additives to make them more addictive. More addictive. But people aren't smoking so much anymore. I don't know. I have no idea. That's about the only good thing I can think of that's happened. I don't know why they're allowing that. I don't know. But the tobacco companies are going everywhere else and selling it. I saw a YouTube video. There's in Indonesia, they're selling it to little babies. There was a 6-month-old baby, or I think a year-old baby, who was chain smoking. Check it out. It's on YouTube. Just check out baby chain smoking. You'll find it. You'll see the baby chain smoking. It's not a joke. It's sick. And the billboards that are not allowed in the United States anymore, and the cigarette machines that are not allowed for sale anymore, they are now for sale in third world countries, right next to the opening where the little baby kiddies, the little grammar school kids, go into school each day. American tobacco. Killers. Killers. I think I'll start out next with the next session with Big America Pharma. Get ready. It'll come in.